You're someone with a vision for your practice, for your side hustle, and for your personal journey. But when it comes to establishing your path on how to get to where you want to be with your practice, things get a little messy. You're also someone who'd prefer to go in person instead of to groups and listening to everyone else's story. To me, it sounds like you could benefit from one-on-one consulting with our experienced practice of the practice consultants. From $5.95 a month and up, you can work with a consultant that will give you more direction and practical tried and tested tips matched to you and your goals. For more information, visit practiceofthepractice.com/apply. Again, that's practiceofthepractice.com/apply. This is the Practice of the Practice podcast with Joe Sanok, session number 1323. I'm Joe Sanok, your host, and welcome to the Practice of the Practice podcast, where we help you build a thriving private practice you absolutely love. We've been doing this since January of 2013, and so this goes live on New Year's Eve of 2025. So we are bidding 2025 adieu and moving into a new year. So a great time to think about what we're doing in our practices, how we want to thrive next year, but also when we're thriving, we don't want to give up the soul of the practice. We want to be able to understand what we want. We want to have our ideal clients. We want to think about the world around us, our communities, the impact we want to have, all of those different things. And so I couldn't think of a better guest to wrap up 2025. We have Dr. Britt Wray, who is an award-winning researcher at Stanford and best-selling author whose work is dedicated to building resilience to the mental health impacts of living on a heated and heating planet amidst climate change and ecological breakdown. She is the director of Circle at Stanford Psychiatry, a research and action initiative focused on climate mental health in the Stanford School of Medicine, and is the founder of Unthinkable, a nonprofit on a mission to tackle the mental health crisis within the climate crisis. She's the author of 2 books, including Generation Dread, Finding Purpose in an Age of Climate Anxiety, which was the finalist for Canada's highest literary nonfiction prize, the Governor General Award, and Rise of the Necrofauna, the Science, Ethics, and Risks of De-Extinction. She's the recipient of the 2025 American Climate Leadership Award, 2023 Canadian Eco Hero Award, and a top prize in science communication excellence from the U.S. National Academies of Science, Engineering, and Medicine. She holds a PhD in science communication from University of Copenhagen, a climate psychology certificate from California Institute of Integral Arts, and completed her postdoc training in human and planetary health at Stanford University. She's been featured on BBC, CBC, as well as TED, the World Economic Forum, and so much more. Britt, welcome to the Practice of the Practice podcast.
Hi, Joe. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, now you can add me to that list.
Yeah, sorry, that was a lot of bio material.
To me, though, it's like when someone has done the amount of not just work, but that people have recognized it. I think it's important to at least talk about some of that in the intro, because people can just hear about you, but it's also like you've done some amazing things in the field of climate work, in the field of mental health, in the field of just like, how do we then translate that into things that the average person can do something with? Because I think academia sometimes is so highfalutin and it doesn't hit the average person. So I'm glad you're doing these amazing things both in academia and then also in the general press.
Oh, thank you.
Well, let's start with climate anxiety. Start light. So a lot of us are doing therapy and working with people. And it's interesting, even my partner and I, we were recently talking, and we both just kind of felt this sense of like anxiety we don't normally feel. And then as we were talking, we're like, there's actually a lot going on in the world right now. And an appropriate response is to feel a little bit more anxiety and worry and like, what is happening? Having 11 and 14-year-old daughters, just there's a lot going on. So that general feeling of dread, tell us about that.
Absolutely. You're pointing to something that so many are talking about because they're feeling it from a multitude of inputs. For some, it's going to be more salient as though it's attached to a specific issue, maybe climate or biodiversity issues. For others, it is the collapse of democracies, rise of fascism. For others, it will be economic insecurity, systemic racism, violence, war. For some, it's all of them swirled together as we recognize that we were marching forward through a polycrisis undergirded by a meta-crisis that is redefining what it means to be human today. And when we feel some distress in the face of this incredibly loaded gun, it seems to be, that we are holding right now as a species, then we hurt because we care, right? We can appreciate that there's nothing maladaptive or pathological about feeling some distress, some anxiety, some fear, some anger or sorrow about what is happening when we appreciate that so much of what we love or deeply value is under threat or is being eroded or is already gone in the case of various ecological disruptions. And this has been reformulated in the area that I study, climate anxiety, as climate compassion instead, to really open up and understand we are feeling this because it's a sign of our attachment to reality and our care for all that is in harm's way. And there's nothing to be ashamed of. We can find ways to experience and sit more comfortably with these deeply uncomfortable emotions, reach out and connect with other people over them, harness their adaptive qualities for change-making potential and meaningful action, and find roots to strengthening ourselves so that we can resiliently take on the future, which is right now, understandably causing a lot of people a lot of dread. Mm-hmm. And so there's a lot to be said about how this can compound onto people's mental health challenges or create new mental health challenges that we can get into. There are therapists around the world who are rising up to become what's quote unquote called climate aware therapists to meet this type of pain for the world or cosmic agony, I've heard it be described as, that some people are shouldering. And to do so in ways where it isn't just about helping ourselves feel better on a planet that is in crisis, but working with the grief, the sorrow, the anxiety to channel the types of movements that will help enlarge the aperture for a better future.
Mm. Now, you use the term climate-aware therapist. What are some aspects of that that you think are important to just the competencies, maybe? So if we look at the next 5 to 10 years, if you had a wand and said, here's what I think every single therapist needs to know when it comes to being climate-aware, what's the baseline that you think people should be going into therapy sessions with?
That's a great question. There are a few things I'd say. Firstly, to approach this issue when it comes into the therapy room as reasonable, appropriate, human, caring, compassionate, not to see it through the lens of pathology off the jump and start talking about catastrophic thinking, and instead to really go on a journey, if one hasn't already, of raising one's literacy about what climate science is telling us today, about the impacts that are predicted to continue. We already see very serious climate impacts around us now, but what the coming few decades look like as a result of the lack of adequate action from power holders, nations, governments, companies, and everyday citizens. So once we really connect with the implications of that info,
and let me ask
then
quick, are there
yes.
certain books that you would say are like required reading? Like if we're going to say like just start to educate yourself. So often I see people just go down these rabbit holes of bad podcasts or bad books. Like are there just a couple books that you're like, this would be the one or two books that would be essential reading to learn more?
For climate aware therapy?
Yeah. I guess specifically you said that as a therapist, don't pathologize and like learn what climate science is actually telling us. Like, are there books around that climate science that you would say this should be
about climate
reading?
Literacy?
Yeah.
Yeah, there are many. Look up the writings of Bill McKibben, Michael Mann, Peter Kalmus, David Wallace Wells, Naomi Klein. There are, if you don't want to hear it directly from a scientist, you can also hear it from science journalists. I've mentioned a couple of them there. And yeah,
That's super helpful.
There are a variety of people to seek out. Catherine Hayhoe. Also, if you're interested in more bite-sized information and not books about this topic, then do follow Catherine Herriot or some of the other people who I just mentioned.
Perfect.
But anywho, back to the issue of baseline climate-aware therapy approaches. So, to be a climate-aware therapist means you need to have a certain level of awareness of what climate science has shown us about what's happening and why it's regarded by scientists around the world that we are leaving the safe operating system for humanity in terms of our planetary boundaries and moving into ecological overshoot and unsafe levels of global warming, what that means for humanity. So then, if we help people come to us without then being met with some kind of pathologizing lens, many people have stories of going to get support for their climate anxiety and the therapists seeing them through a biomedical pathologizing lens that then tells them to, consider this anti-anxiety medication or look at this therapy for their catastrophic thoughts. They end up going home feeling misunderstood, disconnected, many times worse, and further isolated, which can worsen the strain that they're under. Whereas the non-pathologizing approach is really about recognizing that we are in this together. We might be in different boats than our clients or patients if we're a therapist, but we're all in the same ocean because climate change is a collective trauma that is happening to all of us in highly differentiated ways. But that takes some reckoning then with your own awareness and climate emotions as well, to be able to manage them so that you can productively support another person on the journey rather than have defensive reactions that are trying to prioritize your own comfort at the expense of truth or connection or having both eyes open to the predicament, avoidance tactics and so on that might pop up. The other thing I would say is to recognize that everyone in the climate change and mental health space knows that there's no magical psychosocial or clinical intervention that will alleviate all the burdens to mental health that come with climate change. The real effective intervention is systemic climate action, right? We need to stop polluting the atmosphere with the emissions of our fossil fuel burning and our agricultural practices and land transformation practices and so on that are creating the warming. Because we can't argue. Our emotions and our psychologies, they can't go to battle with changing physics all around us. So action and advocacy are part of the climate-aware therapeutic approach in the sense that we need to phase out fossil fuels as a physical and mental health intervention because, as the World Health Organization has stated very clearly many times, our health is now at the mercy of fossil fuels, and the climate crisis has become the number one threat to public health this century. So bringing that in as a component of how one talks about and treats those experiencing climate distress and encourages ways of shepherding, harnessing the anxiety for different behavioral modes of coping, which can look like, yes, personal environmental behaviors, but also linking arms with others and being part of like-minded communities that build a sense of commonality, strength, and potential for change, which brings psychological relief as you live out your values more fulsomely. But that's not all. It's not that the recipe here is to provide a bunch of action and that then you're going to have the antidote to despair, as that famous saying goes, activated in everyone. It also can be supported with a variety of other therapeutic approaches for managing distress, stretching our window of tolerance to deal with life's difficulties. We, of course, can draw on all the contemplative practices, the different professional therapies, the bodily attention of eating well, sleeping well, exercising, spending time with nourishing friends and family, drawing strength from our ancestors and cultural traditions, working with spiritual leaders, all kinds of approaches that are already going to be part of the toolbox for those who help other people get through tough times. And then, importantly, climate-aware therapy also requires, especially when those at the pointy end of climate distress, get really preoccupied with it and face the kind of blinking red lights of urgency mode, because it can feel like, oh my gosh, the world is going to hell in a handbasket, and what on earth am I doing? And then just ingesting all kinds of information with stokes the distress. We're living in this era of doom scrolling. It can be really hard to not just be attached to a fire hose of bad news that stokes a sense of narrative foreclosure and hopelessness about the future. And instead encouraging people to take breaks and to feel good about taking breaks, and to understand that it's a necessity to take breaks from the urgency of all of this, to live your life joyfully and with breadth, and to do it in the way that, as Audre Lorde said, that, you know, self-care administered through taking breaks in this case is not self-indulgence, it's self-preservation. And that's the type of tool that we need, because this is, you know, the climate crisis is not a sprint. It's a marathon, as many people say. It's something happening over the timelines of our lives and that of our children. But I was corrected by a youth climate justice activist who once told me, actually, it's not a marathon, it's a relay race. And I thought that was really apt. Yeah. It's true. It's about sending the baton with someone to the front for a while you can recuperate and take a break, and then go back out once you're restored. So to sum that up, a non-pathologizing, compassionate approach that understands the appropriateness of feeling some distress when one understands the facts about the climate crisis. Secondly, recognizing that you're in this mess with your client as well. This is not just about them. This is happening to all of us. And then thirdly, bringing in that advocacy piece that recognizes that structural systemic change on climate is what's needed to protect and promote mental health in the years ahead.
Yeah, I think I love that you pointed to that there's not just this silver bullet or simple solution for these emotions. Because I think that in a lot of therapy, it's like we have a couple in front of us, they're dealing with certain things. The Gottmans have done a ton of work on what actually works with couples. You know, we're dealing with someone that's dealing with anxiety, just regular kind of everyday anxiety. There's usually modalities that have worked. And to say, we just don't know. This is a giant issue, and there isn't a clear, here's exactly how you should be handling this. It feels like oftentimes it's on one end or the other, where there's people that are totally naive, putting their heads in the sand, maybe not climate deniers, but at least they're just like, I just don't want to read about it anymore. Then there's other people that are saying, we're on the Titanic going down, and any work we do with these clients, it's like, why would we want to make them feel like they shouldn't have panic? Like, they should be panicking. The ship's going down. What I'm hearing from you is this middle path of that relay race, where it's, yes, this is unfolding over our lifetime and, you know, future generations' lifetimes. And for us to be effective, we need to be clear-minded. We need to recognize the crisis. We need to be educated on it. And we also need to join our clients in there in saying, yeah, I don't know either. But like, what can we take steps in? And then empowering clients to be able to take reasonable steps in the world where they have some sort of power and control.
I think that's a really nice way of summing it up. Absolutely. And you mentioned couples therapy. When climate distress or climate anxiety, these terms are often used interchangeably, manifests in an individual, it's not a monolithic thing, right? Of course, it's a spectrum of intensity, and some people will cycle in and out of it and have fleeting experiences that are distressing and then go back to states of comfort and psychological defense. And for others, it becomes so intense that their psychological defenses around it really break down, and they are distressed at the pointy end all the time, and it starts to impact their functional impairment and affect their relationships. And one thing that I hear from a lot of climate-aware therapists is that they really do work with a lot of couples where one part of the couple is fretting about family planning and what that looks like, because they don't feel comfortable putting a child into a climate-changed world because they've lost faith in humanity's ability to prevent catastrophic climate change. And the other part of the couple has a variety of reasons for which they want to have a child and to have a different approach to the climate crisis, and it can create hugely rigid dynamics within the relationship that can lead to some breakdown. Or it's a relational dynamic between a parent and child, where a climate distressed young person feels largely quite abandoned by older generations or the elders in their life who are not legitimizing their concerns or not seeing it as clearly as they are in terms of the implications for their own life and their futures, and how this really is not just about people far away or at a far off future time. This is about them here and now, but especially as they age. And this can also create a lot of distress from that kind of disconnect. And so there's a role for couples therapists absolutely in this space.
I want to thank Headway for sponsoring this episode. As a group practice leader, you know that insurance and admin work can take up hours every week. Time you could be spending with clients or growing your team. Benefits reset season is the perfect opportunity to make improvements to those processes. That's why I personally recommend Headway for group practices. Headway lightens your load with fast and free insurance credentialing and admin support, plus offers competitive per-session rates and bi-weekly payments your team can count on. They're the only platform designed specifically for in-network group practices, and they work with therapy, psychiatric, and hybrid groups of all sizes. Thousands of group practice leaders use Headway to simplify insurance admin and reach more people through in-network care. The best part, there's no subscription fees. Now's a great time to join. With Headway, you'll be helping more people get the care they deserve while supporting your team with more clients and a lighter admin load. Make next year the best year yet for your group practice. Head on over to join.headway.co/Joe. That's join.headway.co/Joe to book a tour. I'm interested in what would climate-aware parenting look like. I'm a parent of 11 and 14-year-old girls. They're very aware of the world and what's going on, and we have those conversations. But what does that look like, or what could it look like? I don't think, similar to probably therapy, it's not just there's one size fits all. But what are maybe some habits that parents should consider as they're raising their kids, knowing what's going on in the world?
There are some of my colleagues who focus on this. They often say it's really fascinating when you talk to parents without the children being present and you ask them, what do you think your kids know about the climate crisis? And they will think it's actually quite little. And perhaps they don't understand the full spectrum or the severity of what's coming out of scientific spaces. And then you ask the children and they actually know everything, or they know so much more than the parents had realized. And that speaks to a type of silence around the topic, or at least room to improve communication on the topic and to prioritize it more in the family culture of what's being addressed around the dinner table. Not that parents need to come with a portfolio or Wikipedia full of knowledge to share. Wow, that was internet. Actually, I could have said an encyclopedia, but with some kind of deep lesson, but really to be open and receptive to what the children are saying, even through sideways remarks, and to respond to their curiosities and answer their questions and make it safe for them to bring those questions and concerns into the home, rather than have them feel like they must bottle it up because it's not part of the relationship and where it tends to put its attention in terms of the topics. So I would say that focusing on how accessible and how inviting you're creating a space for that conversation in your home. And also, we don't have all the answers, and it's okay to not have all the answers as parents. And it's also okay to say, I understand that you're scared, and I'm nervous too, or I'm angry too, or I'm anxious too, but we can figure this out together, and we can be part of communities that are taking action on this issue, that are morally ambitious to create a better future than the one that is by default being given to us right now. And we can take some leadership as parents in terms of what is going on locally that we might be able to join in with, whether that's through regenerative agriculture or protesting or supporting climate candidates or working with kids' education, or you name it, arts and music that are engaging with these types of issues and questions. the climate crisis really touches everything in society, so we can also engage with it from wherever we already are, whatever our authentic interests are, and the skills that we're bringing. And I can recommend doing an All We Can Save climate circle. So this is easy to use, widely employed intervention for creating some conversation and community around you if you are climate concerned and want to find more nourishing and authentic ways to engage with this. There are many parents who use this. There are other approaches such as the Good Grief Network. They have a parenting support group. It's a 10-step peer support program that was originally created a number of years ago just to help anyone, but they've gotten so much interest from parents specifically looking for how to support their kids in this that they have parent-specific peer support groups now as well, and it's modeled off of Alcoholics Anonymous for moving people through the emotions towards deeper, meaningful engagement. And I think it's just about modeling that you care and that you're by the side of your child, rather than dismissing the concerns and not validating their feelings, which is where a lot of the relationship breakdown can come. But if they see you demonstrating some real action, rolling up your sleeves, getting creative, being imaginative, applying yourself, they're going to feel supported. And it doesn't need to be perfect, and the actions don't need to pay off in the direction that you want them to, but it's about that sense of being walked with and held in a scary time that climate-aware parenting requires.
You know, I always love asking experts what their personal habits look like. Like, how do you personally make your own mental health? I mean, when you're studying things this deeply, it seems like it easily could go into just like the world is going to hell in a handbasket. So what does it look like for you personally in regards to your own habits around mental health and climate?
Yeah, I appreciate you recognizing that, because it really is. It is a topic that will do your head in. And frontline climate professionals, so the climate scientists, the environmental journalists, the green policymakers, increasingly the health professionals focused on climate and so on, bear a real psychological toll from staring into the abyss of this predicament day in, day out. The worst part being noting the lack of effective action and these decisions that are being taken actively in the wrong direction by power holders, and the frustration and the moral injury and the institutional betrayal, all those senses that one cycles through when you're keenly aware. So, I mean, I got into this work a number of years ago because it was affecting just working as a science communicator and appreciating, you know, the ecological track we were increasingly on, that kicked up so much distress for me that it started affecting my mental health. And I thought, okay, well, you know, although it's uncomfortable, it's interesting. I wonder if what I'm going through is affecting other people. And then did some research for the book, Generation Dread, and found out indeed it's moving through millions of people, and now there's this new field around it. So what I do and what I've learned to do are a number of things to help keep myself sane, including Zen Buddhist practice has been extremely helpful. The monastics from Plum Village, the lineage from Thich Nhat Hanh, they've been devoting themselves in the last many years to supporting the overwhelm and despair that can come knocking when doing this work as a climate professional, thanks to partnerships with a leading climate diplomat, Christiana Figueres' organization, Global Optimism, making these tools accessible. That's been extremely helpful for me. Definitely the basics of making sure I'm exercising, making sure I'm sleeping well, going on long walks, connecting with nature, hiking, or being in a kind of forest bathing environment whenever I can, because land healing practices are so real and they help reconnect me to the work itself and why I care to be part of movements that are trying to protect the natural world. I would say also being conscious of my digital diet and how much I'm letting in, because that narrative consumption, I mean, I swing wildly back and forth depending on what the day is like, because sometimes it's just full on a wall of death anxiety that comes right at you based on what's being discussed, the tone in which it's being shared, you know, whether the communication rhetoric is just before, for instance, just before I logged on to this call with you, I saw something on my phone about researchers at the University of Exeter saying that when we hit our 2-degree Celsius level of warming, estimated around 2050, that it's going to be 2 billion people dead. And you just see the fervor and the panic from people in the comments, and you get that feeling, which I've had a million times, of how overwhelming and dreadful some of this can feel like to engage with. But then it's also about, firstly, questioning everything that you see, looking to fact check, et cetera, and then also reminding yourself of the critical feature of psychological flexibility, and that it's our job to find ways of balancing hope and fear, or hope is not the word for me that gets me through this. It's more courage and fear, or love and fear, and ways to live meaningfully even in the face of forces that are threatening life itself, right? Because that's what humans have been doing for forever. Yeah. We're extremely existential species, and in terms of how intimate our relationship is to death, anxiety, and ways that we've forged meaning in tough times when we're being trampled or threatened and so on. It's just that this is at such a scale, and we also have access to information in these ways that we hadn't before, that it can be very, very hard to shield yourself from in order to then relax and be joyful and so on and so forth. So then you have to have some responsibility for yourself about what you're dosing, what kinds of framings you're allowing yourself to be exposed to, and how you're filling the cup back up. So even though there's all this stuff that's increasing the deficit, how do you bring up the strengths-based approaches that are widening that sense of gratitude and joy and love and connection? And then at the end of the day, it's about appreciating that, this distress, this grief, it's the other side of the coin of our love and our appreciation for this miracle of life. So bringing all that in could look like meditation as regularly as possible. That really helps me. And having a community of climate-aware professionals and colleagues who we like to say on my team that we are people who can't not do this. It's like once you see it, you can't not do this. Everything has to change about how you're working. And that's what we feel called to do. And it's nice to be around other people who are filled with that sense of purpose, essentially.
Well, Britt, the last question that I always ask is, if every private practitioner in the world were listening right now, what would you want them to know?
To come join the movement, that there's so much space for you. Even more so than that, we need you. You don't require a background in science or tech or policy to get involved. This is a human issue for everyone, and you have particularly special skills to bear at this time. Because at the end of the day, we like to talk about the climate crisis, and we have been doing so for many decades, mistakenly through only these gigatons and graphs and science tech policy proposals. But it's really a crisis of human behavior, psychology, relationships, how we treat each other, how we treat the earth itself, the more than human world. And you're the ones who know the most about what makes humans tick, our psychologies. We need the behavioralists and the psychologists at the table to both unwind the problem and wind up the healing. So it's if you are interested in attaching your skills and ways of working to this topic, please check out the Climate Psychology Alliances of North America, of the UK, the Climate Psychiatry Alliance, if that's relevant for you, Psychologists for a Safe Climate. There are many groups that are now helping to resource, train, and professionally organize therapists to be of use in this space.
So awesome. Britt, if people want to get your book, if they want to follow you more, where should we send them?
Well, my Substack newsletter is unthinkable.substack.com. You can get me there, as well as my book, Generation Dread, Finding Purpose in an Age of Climate Anxiety, available wherever you get your books. Thank you.
Thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thank you for having me, Joe.
You know, it's shows like this that are inspiring and dreadful. And you know, as we think through just what we're doing as therapists, I want us to just continue to examine these tough topics. This year, we have interviewed so many different people that are doing just amazing work around the world. So if you've missed any of those, one of the most recent was episode 1318 with New York Times bestselling author Amanda Ripley. She talked about high conflict. If we go back a little bit before that, we talked about, Dr. Michael Mann on our fragile moment, lessons from the Earth's past and how to survive the climate crisis. That was episode 1307. Talked with so many different people in the last year. So this year we've really focused on not just the clinical side, not just the marketing and business side, but the big issues of the world. We've had politicians like Senator Debbie Stabenow was on, and we've really tried this year to lean into the big things that are hitting us and our clients. And so I hope you go back, and if you haven't listened to a bunch of those, we've talked through so many interesting and difficult topics this year. That to me, as I wrap up this year, I'm thinking about how they have given me more hope and they've also given me more dread, which I think that mixture of both hope and dread can be motivating for us. And it can help us say, okay, this is not the world that I want to live in, nor do I want future generations to have to live in. I want to do something. And so one of the big things that I've asked many of these top leaders, scientists, politicians has been, what are your habits and how do you find even just like the energy to do things when you know there's so many things going on in the world? One of my biggest takeaways has been find your lane. And I heard that from Britt today. I've heard that from other people, that find that one corner that you can dedicate to, because we can't do it all. We can't do it, everywhere, but it could be your practice. It could be one issue in your community. It could be, just getting a small group of 6 people together that are going to do something that helps build you back up after doing really tough work in the world. Whatever it is, I want to encourage you to just find other people to join you in this. And if you need help, reach out to us. We have great communities here at Practice of the Practice. Also, we couldn't do this show without our sponsor. Today's sponsor is Headway. Headway is sponsoring this episode. Also, you've heard me talking about, as I've been building a new counseling practice from scratch, I'm going to be using Headway as part of that model. They're the only platform designed specifically for in-network group practices, and they work with therapy, psychiatry, and hybrid groups of all sizes. They help thousands of group practice owners to simplify their insurance admin and reach more people through in-network care. Make next year the best year yet for your practice. Head on over to join.headway.co/Joe. Again, that's join.headway.co/Joe to learn more. Thank you for letting me into your ears and into your brain. Have a great day. I'll talk to you soon. Special thanks to the band Silence is Sexy for that intro music, and this podcast is designed to provide accurate and authoritative information in regard to the subject matter covered. It is given with the understanding that neither the host, the producers, the publishers, or guests are rendering legal, accounting, clinical, or other professional information. If you want a professional, you should find one.